Hello and welcome to the GCSUNScast, a Gold Coast Suns show by fans for fans. I'm your host Shane, and this week's episode is brought to you by our Patreon sponsors Dale Snelling, Jack Stad, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Kate Calland, Chris Moore, Tom Kim and Tim. If you'd like to join our Patreon sponsors, head on over to patreon.com/GCSUNScast where you can help support the show financially. Otherwise, jump on over to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to get your podcasts from. Like, subscribe, and review the show to help other Suns fans find their way to our little community. Now, tonight's guest is a Patreon sponsor himself. I'd like to welcome to the show Paul Vosti. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
How you going, Shane? Thanks for having me.
No worries, thank you. You've been a Patreon sponsor since February 2019 and supported the show for coming on to 18 months now. So it's been fantastic having your support, and I'm glad I can get you on the show and have a few words and talk about our beloved Suns.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's great what you guys have done over the last couple of years, and it was good catching up, having a few beers at the Gabba last year with Wayne and all the family and friends of the Suns. That was a good day that day.
Yeah, that was a good night. Definitely a good night. So let's start off the show by asking what's one of your memorable moments as a Suns supporter?
I think memorable moments, sort of the Suns comes back to the Jack Bowes and Wayne Bowes connection, and we sort of when Jack got drafted, pretty close to Wayne and the family. I've known Jack since the day he was born up in Cairns, and I lived up there at the same time. And so at that stage, I was pretty lost with the footy club I was barracking for, Carlton. So I found a reason to jump ship and get on the Suns. And I said to Wayne, where possible, we'd get to as many games as we could and travel around Australia. So we actually called it the Jack Bowes Tour, and sort of started posting it on Facebook and Instagram, and with our work we're pretty flexible with where we can work, so we're sort of lucky enough to get around and to a lot of the games throughout Australia. So that's probably the main thing, and then that's led to so many opportunities within the club and meeting some wonderful people throughout Australia, and actually seeing the interstate cheer squads, how passionate they are about the Gold Coast Suns. We were lucky enough to get together with 17 guys in Western Australia and met them at the pub before the game, had a few beers, and then helped them with the banner, and they just loved it. And Jeffer and the Higgins family over there, and then Mitch Powell in South Australia, Sharon Hayes, Robbo and Jules Summers, and all these other supporters we've met. And it's such a small club, and it's in its infancy, but the passion is just as strong as these power Melbourne clubs, and that have got 80 or 90,000 members. And I think it's actually that's been the real pleasure, because it's shown us the inner circle of what this means to the people that support the Gold Coast Suns, and from that, it's sort of become like a local footy club for me and Wayne. And Wayne Bowes has been terrific in fostering that with a lot of the families, and brought a lot of all the new draftee families together with the help of Sam Cohen initially, who was terrific, and then Sean Hart went the next level with that, and with the families and extended close friends, and having meeting places before and after games, and just making everyone feel a bit more connected and not isolated in the AFL world. So it's been a wonderful journey, and met some amazing people, and the players of from Davey Swallow to Witsy all the way through to the young boys in Darcy and Braden and Will Powell and Bosey have just been terrific. They're always open for a chat, love to have a beer when they're allowed to, and they're just great young men. Yeah. So that's probably been, in essence, the how fortunate I am to have been in this position with the Suns.
Yeah, the connections that you build with the club, with not just if you're fortunate enough to build those connections with players and the family directly involved with the club, but not just that, building that connection with fellow supporters that you've got in common, something that you cheer passionately about. It's really touching and it's a really bonding moment, which essentially it's what we all support footy for. It's that connection to bond and just cheer for something and all be supportive of something that we love, which is the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah.
So what's your favourite win then for the Suns, Paul?
I probably couldn't go past, especially being an ex-Carlton supporter, and probably couldn't go past the Suns game versus Carlton when Jack kicked the match winner. That was pretty amazing that day, and then the other one was the doubleheader we won at Sydney against the Swans when both the NEFL and the AFL side both won. So, bit of a story of that one. There was a few of the boys we knew were playing in the NEFL side. Jack and Benny Ainsworth and Pierce Hanley were coming back from injury, and not that I'm condoning betting, but we saw that the NEFL side was paying 7-1, so we had a few dollars on the NEFL side to beat the Swans, who were on top of the ladder. And they got the victory, and then we were watching it, and the members, a good mate of mine, Michael Usher, organised this members' seats, and as it turned out, all the Suns NEFL players and support with Hardy and everyone were all sitting together in the same section. So we were all together. NEFL boys had won. We'd won a few dollars. We're having a few beers, and then we were massive underdogs to beat the Swans. Had heaps of injuries, and they were just fantastic. I think we were 4 or 5 goals down early in the game, and just butted in. And we actually travelled with a Sydney supporter, Steve Baker, and we had a bet on that game that the loser would buy membership for the other side. So Steve's now a proud Victorian Gold Coast Suns member, and loves it actually. He's really embraced. He still works for the Swans, but he embraces the Suns as his second side. And we had a wonderful weekend. So they're probably my two best wins in the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's a special moment. I do love the Carlton win with Bose kicking that sealer. A very special moment. I'm not going to drag on about that. I've probably mentioned it a dozen times on this show that I've got the match ball for that one. Favourite Suns player? Now, assuming it's Jack Bose, who's second? Jack gets that. Look, Darcy's definitely I've known Darcy and Jack lived together, so got to know Darcy really well and his family. Karen and Steve are just wonderful people. Same with Benny Ainsworth and with Vicky and Steve. We've become actual friends. So probably those two boys are the two that I follow every single second they're playing footy, and they're great young men and great role models and wonderful family. But there's a list of another 10, 15, 20 players there that they're just a good group. I think what happened with Stewie coming in, and the Melbourne media had really were giving it to the Suns at that stage, and players were leaving and everything like that. But most of the players that were leaving, most of the players weren't leaving; they were being moved on because they weren't of the right character. And I think the group we've got now are all there for the right reasons. They're actual friends. They've become very good mates as well, which sometimes in the Victorian clubs it's harder to have that level of mateship in the AFL system because it's just harder to get around. It's hard if someone lives in Brighton and the other player lives in Richmond. It's hard to meet and say, oh, let's go have a game of golf. Whereas on the Gold Coast, it's just so easy for them to, meet at Burley Heads and have a game of golf or go for a surf. And they're just a wonderful group of young men. They're all coming through at the right time together. So exciting times. Do you play much golf yourself, Paul?
Used to, but then I got into triathlons and long distance triathlons, and you just can't do both. But I think when I do come and live up in the Gold Coast in a few years' time, I'll get back into my golf.
Yeah, it's been a while myself since I played golf. I just don't find the time, but it was always a good bit of exercise, a bit of fun with some mates, and having a few beers, even if you have to sneak them on the course yourself, is always a bit of fun. All right, so this year has been a strange year. Obviously, what's going on off field with COVID and the things the AFL has had to do to get the season going. What changes or rules have happened this year you would like to see the AFL continue with next year?
I'm happy with them to continue with the being able to run out of the goal square for the kick-ins. I think that's been a progressive change, and it's allowed it makes it easier to get it out of the forward 50. I think that's fine. I wouldn't want to keep 16-minute quarters. I think it eliminates the style of player that you need in the game that can, really run their opponent into the ground, and it's benefiting players with less endurance. So I'd like to see it go back to the traditional length of the quarter. They're probably the two I thought of that they've changed, and then I've got one that I'd like to see them change, but that's probably your next question.
Okay, so what is that? What would you like to see changed?
Well, everyone tends to focus on the biggest problem in the game is the rolling balls. So when there's too many people around contested footy. So, you have the Kevin Bartletts of the world talking about, interchange and things like that. One thing I've always looked at, and I just keep seeing it, is that the umpires take too long to throw up the ball. So the nominating of the ruckman, if they just got to the things, they'd right, it's ball up, they just went in and threw it up. No nominating ruckman, just throw it up. You would find that would probably save between 10, 30 seconds at a stoppage. The amount of extra players that actually gets to that stoppage in that period of time is ridiculous. I showed a thing on one of the footy shows the other day, just the difference in just hesitating with your kick, how many, that 10 to 15 seconds, how long that was enabled players to flood behind the footy. So I think if you did that, there's no nominating ruckman, the umpire comes in, ball up, that would reduce a lot of congestions around stoppages and would make the game open up a lot more. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I've heard that one before. It does seem a bit ridiculous that the umpires sort of turn around, like the players are school age kids. All right, who's gonna go for this ball? It does seem a bit immature, and that's something that hopefully the AFL does rub out and reverse. I like the 17 rounds. I know it's only a shorter season, but I like the evenness and the quality of the fixture when we only play each team once. I personally would probably like that to return, but I'm not sure if it will. And the footy frenzy...
Like with that in, remember when they did it in American football? And actually, that's what they went to, a 7-8. They went to a season where they all played each other once.
Yeah.
And everyone said, they're crazy. You can't take that much revenue out of the game. It actually increased revenue because it made the product more scarce, and sponsors wanted to pay more to be involved, and the game's never been stronger. So I'd be happy with 17 games and maybe even a deeper final series.
I think that's I'd rather 17 games a season, and then instead of a top 8, maybe a top 10, or a top 8 with a wild card weekend prior to that, where you've got the 9
to 12 playing for 2 spots.
Yeah. I think that would be much better. Obviously, the shorter amount of games means that wins are more and losses have more impact. And we're seeing that this season. I feel like the tie that Richmond and Collingwood had earlier in the season, the tie that the Suns and the Bombers have, they're all going to come into play and have a bit of an impact this year. Whereas in previous years, it's just considered a percentage buffer. But this year, Collingwood could very well still just sneak into the 8 because of that tie. And Essendon could not make the 8 because of that tie. And same with Richmond, they could probably push into the top 4 because they have that extra 2 points from the draw. So I'd like to see the 17-round season continue in the future. Honestly, I don't know whether it will or not, but we'll have to wait and see what the AFL continue to do. Rising Star. Which Sun do you think is the front runner for the Rising Star this year? You can't really rule out Matt Rowell. Noah Anderson's been sensational. And then you've got the brilliance of Isaac Rankin and the determination and composure of Connor Buderick.
Yeah, it's a you wouldn't want to be a bookie. It's probably the first year for a long time where the bookmaker, you could have 5 or 6 picks and not get the winner this year. But I've always been I've debated it over, with my mates that the Rising Star should be just for first year players. I think there's a massive difference when a player's able to have that second pre-season. And I know it's normally due to injuries, but the 10-game rule. So for that, even though I love him and he's going to be a superstar, Isaac, I'd rule him out. But yeah, I'd probably go with Noah at the moment. I think his body of work for the whole year and some of the things he's been able to do in the midfield in the back half is pretty special for a first-year player. So I think him or the guy from Freo are going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Noah Anderson has had a really fantastic couple of games lately. We'll get to the North Melbourne game later in the show, but he was fantastic in that game. And he's put together a couple of really good performances. And just showing his durability and consistency to still have an impact in his first season, which can't be ruled out because I don't think Sarong from Fremantle has played every game this year. So I feel like Anderson's got the edge over him. And, still probably can't rule out Matt Rowell. He just needs to get back into the media spotlight and get some more attention. I'm sure when the Rising Star nominations start coming in, the voters, they're going to have to look at some footage of Matt Rowell again, and they'll just be blown away by how impressive he was in those few games. Now, the Suns got a win against North Melbourne, and mathematically, they're still in contention for finals. Do you think we are a shot of making finals this year? Do you think it's going to be next year, 21, or do you think it's going to be 2022?
I don't think we'll make it this year. I think the losses to Melbourne, Essendon, St Kilda, and who was the other close side? The Bulldogs. It probably hurt us. I think we were in all those games, and if we'd won a couple of those, we probably would have snuck into the 8. But in terms of that, I've never been worried about that this year anyway. I've been wrapped with the progress. I said to Wayne at the start of the year, sort of following the Brisbane model of a couple of years ago, that if we could sort of win 5 or 6 games this year and have a percentage of around 90, that was probably the target that, for me as a supporter, I would have said, well, that's a successful year. I think the percentage factor when you're looking at a young developing side shows you how competitive they are across the whole season and within games. Like, if you just focus on the win-loss and they've got a percentage of 60, you're probably looking, well, yeah, they've won 5 games again, but they've been thrashed in 10. So I think having that percentage, I think we're at 101 at the moment after 14 rounds, it's just fantastic. So it just shows, even the Geelong game, I think if you remember back to the Geelong game, like, if we kicked a couple of goals late in the third quarter, we would have probably been
a bit closer, yeah.
I think we could have gone in 13 points up at three-quarter time. Now, they blew us away in the last quarter, but if you're 13 points up instead of 5 points down at three-quarter time, it's a different mindset. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, Shane, unfortunately get focused on wins and losses with, and every side's at a different stage of that development and premiership cycle. So, leading to what you were saying, the Suns have been pretty open in their to their members and that it's always been about 2022, and that was when all the planets are meant to align with the list in terms of the age structure, the games played, and when we're sort of ready to start making our salt. So we could possibly be a year ahead of schedule, and if things went right next year, certainly be in a position to contend to the bottom part of the eight. But I think by 2022, we should be starting to, as members and supporters, be expecting that. And if they didn't play finals by 2022, we'd probably want to know why.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're on the right track. And this season, while it's still yet to be completed, 5 wins, a draw, and a percentage of over 100 is pretty impressive. And I think at the start of the year, if we were told that was what we were going to finish on, assuming it was going to be a 22-round season, I'd say we probably would have taken that, wouldn't we?
9 out of 10 footy judges in footy heartland in Victoria, and 9 out of 10 of my mates unequivocally said we would win Wooden Spoon. There was no one else that would come second.
Yeah.
So, would come last. It was just like Gold Coast will finish bottom, and then we'll work out who's 17th, 16th, 15th. So it's been an outstanding season, and they've played. And credit to Stewie, and you even look at things like the ruck work of Jared Witts. For the last 2 years, it's always been tap to right, tap to the hip, keep the footy in close, play Gower, real inside footy. Now, round 2, he grabbed it and kicked it out of the centre. He's hitting outside of stoppages. They're playing through the corridor, exciting brand of footy. Like, it's all the layers of the game that the coaching staff are teaching the players now. That the first start was contested footy, Dower in tight, defend, keep it a contest. Now they're starting to show the footy world Suns are playing good footy. The AFL aren't putting them on Thursday and Friday night because they're playing the style of footy they were in 2018. They're playing a brand of footy now that people want to watch and are excited about.
Yeah, it's been great to watch football this year. So, as we look ahead now to 2021 and beyond, who do you think the Suns need to target to bring into our side to improve us? We've had a lot of players being linked to us over the last few weeks. There's been Nathan Broad, there's been Rory Atkins. I think I even heard someone link Taylor Walker to the Suns over the weekend. So, which players do you think the Suns need to target to improve? Because the other thing, with all the football being played up here in the Gold Coast, players are really getting a taste of the Gold Coast lifestyle and just how good it can be to play the sport that you love in world-class facilities in fantastic weather and not get harassed when you walk out onto the street. It's got to be a big selling point for players.
Oh, absolutely. Mark Evans was licking his lips when he heard the hub and all the stuff that was happening, because it's basically the whole AFL community are getting a first-hand taste of what Gold Coast life is. And trust me, sitting in Melbourne for 3 months in the middle of winter, and it's not a bad place to be, the Gold Coast. And I think that leads to your question's a really interesting question, because you can look at the list and it can change. Like, obviously we're going to get young Davies and Joel Jeffrey in this year's draft for free again. So, and they're both 190 plus utility style players. So the list is going to keep evolving, but if you keep thinking towards that 2022 I think what will happen is that the club will keep strategically looking at players of great culture and great habits like Brandon Ellis that'll bring from premiership systems or successful systems like Hawthorn, Geelong and Richmond. And probably those three in particular. And they'll just keep trying to bring in players for the now that will take pressure off the younger bodies and keep developing the younger talent of what you need to be an AFL premiership style player and what it actually goes into that happening. And then like Brisbane with a Lachie Neale, there's going to be players that are up here right now that are talking to their managers and saying, when I come out of contract, I want to finish my career in Queensland. And that hasn't happened. It's been Craig Cameron and his team ringing managers saying, have you got anyone? Have you got anyone? Does anyone want to come up here? And I think we're going to be the destination club, and it'll be someone like, I remember talking to Jared Witts when he left Collingwood and he was up there last year, and he said, I'm 7 foot, I can go to a cafe, I can eat my breakfast, no one hassles me, no one asks me for selfies, and I just love playing footy and love the lifestyle here. So not every player's like that, Shane. Some players love the attention, love being in the footy heartlands, but there's players that, now who's to say Dustin Martin couldn't turn around next year and say, well, I've won 3 flags at Richmond, I want to have the last 3 years on the Gold Coast, just being left alone playing footy. You don't know what's out there. So I think they'll have some players presented to them that'll give them opportunities to make the right decision.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting times. The only other player I want to ask your thoughts on is Brad Crouch. He was so close to coming to the Suns last year. He's a free agent this year. Do you think the Suns should target Brad Crouch, or do you think we no longer need a player of his type?
Yeah, no, I think the horse is bolted, actually. I think Rowell and Anderson coming on literally is ready-made. That needs probably not as, we probably don't need him like we probably did last year. Like if they'd struck the deal last year, he probably would have fit. We would have been happy about it. But I think now the money you'd have to pay to get him, I think, would be far better. You know, like we're on a Gold Coast Suns podcast, so let's dream.
Yeah.
You'd rather save the money for him to throw a big deal at Darcy Moore.
Yeah, absolutely. We need a strong key back, I think, with Thompson suffering another ACL. Although I heard from a friend of the show, Tom Boswell, during the week that he's going to have keyhole surgery, Thompson. So they're hopeful that they'll be able to... Well, the keyhole surgery is to assess the damage and what they can do. So there's still hope that Thompson will be able to return sometime next year and play AFL. But until then, we'll just have to wait and see what the club gives us. Finally, before we get into the match review, Paul, this is your chance to talk about anything Suns related you'd like to talk about. Now, we spoke off air earlier, and you wanted to bring up list sizes. So with the Suns and the AFL cutting back list sizes, we suspect it's going to be 38 plus 2 rookies. Hopefully the Suns get those extra concessions still. But what's your take on the list sizes?
Yeah, that's the info that I've been getting told as well. And I think that's going to put us in a really strong position again with that. For me, it's always about the premiership, the timing of your list as well, and we've spoken about that quite a bit. But is that with these big clubs like Liam Baker at the moment at Richmond, you know, he's right in contention for all Australian small back. Now he's on Richmond's rookie list. So Richmond are going to turn around with 43 on their primary list and 5 rookies, having to possibly get rid of 10 players. Now, there's going to be some talent, some experienced talent out there that would normally not be accessible to the Gold Coast Suns. So I think it's really exciting what if we're still allowed to have a few more players than the other sides because of being a development club. It could be quite exciting what might be actually out there, and same goes with the coaching and support staff. There's been a lot in the media about Dean Solomon and Hart and these wonderful people that have had to be let go, and those guys in particular were fantastic to me, and especially to Wayne and his family over the last few years. They're just outstanding football people. But the club had to make a decision to get under the cap. Now, Gold Coast need more coaches than what a Richmond would next year, because Richmond don't need as many coaches in the development area. So maybe, Stewie and that have probably had to make a decision around, well, how many people do we need in this footy club to teach these young people? All right, we might have to let go of a level 4 fantastic coach in Dean Solomon, but we might be able to pick up 3 quality development coaches for the same money, for example. So I think that it's a really interesting be a fly on the wall and how they've actually come up with the decisions, and all the clubs are going to have to make some really tough decisions in this COVID world. So yeah, but I think Gold Coast are in a really good position to take advantage of a lot of these changes. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, it's definitely a watch this space, and I suggest that fans reserve their judgment and criticisms on some of these decisions until we see the whole picture pan out at the end of the season. All right, let's get into the match review, Paul. So Gold Coast Suns, 12 goals, 1991, defeated North Melbourne, 4 goals for 28. Sexton kicked 4 goals, Day and King with 2 apiece. The young Suns really stood up. Rankin was impressive, especially early in the first quarter. Lukosius had his usual impact. Anderson had an impressive game as well. And it was just nice to watch some stress-free footy, because I pretty much felt like the game was over a few minutes into it. How do you see it, Paul?
Yeah, it's funny to get ahead of yourself in that situation. Like one of my little mates, Bud Wallace, he's a Collingwood supporter, but he's also bought a Suns membership, and he's proud and passionate now. And he was texting me, "Oh, no, you've got this in the bag," and you don't know. Like, North looked off their game, but but it just stayed that way. The commentators were saying by the end it was like they were playing against witches' hats, and it certainly wasn't what we're used to seeing out of a Gold Coast Suns game.
No, we're used to seeing a high-pressure brand of footy, and the Suns have been a bit poor in that in the last week. So I was looking forward to seeing whether the Suns can bring back that high pressure. But North Melbourne weren't providing much resistance. So it was basically the Suns having free rein to exercise their ball movement and take the game on. So we saw less down the line kicking and more running through the corridor, which was great to see. Very exciting game of football. My only criticism from the game is the goal kicking accuracy was well down. 19 behinds, 12 goals. I just feel like they should have been a lot further in front. King kicked 4 behinds himself, missed a couple of easy shots in front of goal. Corbett the same with 3 behinds. They really need to nail these behinds and kick goals, because it's going to come back and bite them, especially in a tighter contest.
Yeah, it's funny that, and it's a bit like when you're younger and you play basketball and you miss your first shot and you just keep missing. It just became infectious. But you're right, the the ball movement was completely, and I think that was like to sit back on your couch on a Sunday night and watch it. It was pretty good to watch the talent that is on the list as well. The Rankins, Lukosius and Bowes and Benny Ainsworth and the decision making they were making. I think we had 15 marks inside 50, which, you know, that hasn't happened for years. So it just showed that the ball movement was coming. It was coming down pretty quickly, and the players. There was a lack of pressure around the footy by North Melbourne.
Yeah, there was. Do you have any other criticisms to add to that game?
No, not really. Anytime you have 31 shots to 8, it's a pretty comprehensive victory. I was pretty confident with the 9-day break we'd win. We were out on our feet the last couple of games, the last quarter against Richmond, and then the Carlton game where the boys were spent. I thought with the 9-day break, I was pretty hopeful they'd come out running, and they were good from the start. So no, it was terrific.
All right, well, let's move on to some positives.
This is incredible!
Lachie Weller, 100 games, the first academy graduate to do so. He didn't have a huge impact on the game, but he still did his bit, and it was good to see Lachie, become the first Sun academy graduate to hit that 100 games. He went about it the hard way by getting drafted to Fremantle first, but he's back in Suns colours, and he hasn't disappointed since coming over, has he?
It's fantastic, and again, I've been fortunate enough to meet Lachie plenty of times, and just a wonderful young man, and we got Charlie Bellard out of that deal. For the Victorians that don't understand that he wasn't just a straight swap for pick 2, so I think Weller and Bellard over the journey are going to prove to be a pretty good double for a pick 2. So I think credit to Lachie. I know at times it was unfair, the scrutiny he was being put under. It wasn't. He didn't. All he said is that he wanted to come home and play footy at the Gold Coast. He didn't. He wasn't part of the bidding process. So I think he's stood up to a lot of the pressure over the last couple of years, and he's had a great year. He was lucky enough to play in the games down at Melbourne at the start of the year for the Australia side, and he played terrific down there as well. And I think one of the benefits of this COVID year, again, that Suns have definitely been, is that we've been on prime time. We've had all the armchair critics, the Gerard Healeys, all the commentators, our mates Mitch Cleary, who is a Suns supporter. Everyone's getting to see more of these footballers now and actually realise that they've got a fair bit of talent. So, congratulations to Lachie, and I'm sure he'll go on and play a lot more games for the Gold Coast.
A couple of other positives to add to that. I thought Witts did a sensational job against Goldstein, who's been one of the form ruckmen in the competition this year, really nullifying Goldstein and beating him at his own game. King's athleticism in that second quarter to burn off Noah Anderson in that middle and run towards goal. It's a shame he couldn't convert, but that was pretty impressive. We could be playing King on the wing and have Peter Wright down forward at one point. Sexton returned with a bang. His 4 goals, all having an impact, 4 straight goals, so maybe the other players can learn how to kick straight from him. And McPherson returned to the side with 23 pressure acts leading the Suns. He added to the midfield rotations, which is something we've been calling out for a while now. With attending just under 30% of the centre bounces. So McPherson did well. What positives did you take from the game? What was probably your favourite?
Yeah, look, it was great to see Darcy back, and he had his, from the start, he had his mojo back. I think it was interesting, his season, because after the pre-season games, he was the highest ranked player at the club, and I think he got tagged and sort of just went off form a little bit, and then they played him more as a permanent forward role, and he was, it's a hard position. So it was great to see him back in that mid forward rotation. I think with King, King's King's just exciting. It's scary what he's going to do, and who's to say? Yeah, like Healy said, maybe he could be on the wing and he could be kicking it to his brother Max coming out of the goal square. You know, who's to say the Twins don't play together in Gold Coast Suns colours in a few years' time?
Oh, that certainly is something to dream about. And we'd be remiss if not to mention Ben Ainsworth, who had the highest player ratings for the Suns in this game with 19.5. He had a stellar game, 23 disposals, 11 marks, countless inside 50s, and kicked a brilliant snap goal as well. What do you make of his game?
Oh, Benny was brilliant, and it's no surprise that Ainsworth and Bowes are both having their best season injury-free. You know, their first 3 years, both of them were injury interrupted, and each time they were just hitting their straps. So they had sort of 6 to 8 week injuries. Ben's a star, and once he just gets more and more belief in his body, he's going to turn into a wonderful player for the club.
All right, and to finish up, the return of the play of the game.
Play of the game.
Goes to Noah Anderson. His 360-degree turn into at the forward 50 after help of an intercept from fellow Suns players. 360-degree turn and ran into the forward 50. Kicked a great goal from about 40 out. Fantastic effort from Anderson. And that goes along with news that Anderson has re-signed for 2 years. So that's all of the Suns' key young stars signed up long term.
Yeah, it's wonderful news for the club. I just can't wait for the first one of them to sign their third contract. I've got to give him a shout. I've got to mate Hawthorn supporter David Leach, who's a great friend of Bosey as well, and he just keeps telling, Anderson will be back at Hawthorn. That's where his dad played. Rowell will be here. You know, it'll be wonderful when the first lot of these boys re-sign their next contract and stop some of these Victorians continually thinking they're all going home.
Well, I reckon the Suns should target a Hawthorn young gun, Will Day. He is a Sun supporter as he was growing up, so he's been one of the shining lights for Hawthorn this year, and I think the Suns could really use him.
I like that, Shane.
Yeah. You mentioned before Jack Bowes having a career best year. He's been playing down back. Now, what's your thoughts on Jack Bowes playing down back as his position, and do you think he should stay there?
I think with Jack is that it's funny. We've had a few chats about it. Man, Jack just as because I've known him my whole life, is that he's just flexible. He can play he can play anywhere. So ideally, if you said, where would you like him to play? You'd say midfield. That's where he learnt his craft and is probably best suited. But at the end of the day, you can't have 18 midfielders. But Jack can sort of play forward, wing, back. And even his roles back, he can play all different roles. Like yesterday, he was on Zerga or whatever his name is, and he kept him goalless. The goal he had, Jack was on the bench at the time, and he took him deep, so Jack was out of the game, but he just played his role for the team. So he's a very selfless player, and I think ultimately the time will come when we get further down the track and the Suns will probably be running 8 or 10 players through the midfield like a lot of these other sides and like our supporters are wanting us to do, but they're not doing it at the moment because they're trying to keep structure and trying to keep like the back seven together. So Charlie Ballard and Will and Jack and Lukosius all get used to each other. Trying to keep the midfield group get used to each other, bodies of work, games together. And then that time will come that, in 3 or 4 years, there'll probably be McPherson, Bowes, Ainsworth, Rowell, Anderson, Weller, you name it, they'll all be running through the midfield at periods of time. And so, like the Collingwood at certain stages, about 8 to 10 players running through the midfield. But it's probably a long answer to your question, but I think his flexibility is his biggest asset. So just keep developing that flexibility so that if we need him, wherever we need him, we can use him in that role.
Fantastic. Well, it's time to end the show. Go Suns.
Thank you.